Cons of Reddit. Which crimes were respected in prison, which were hated, why? Attorney here with several prison guard friends in the Northeast USA. Substantially violent crimes will get you respect, as in people will leave you alone. Smart guy crimes, if you ran a good scam or were a major drug player, are also respected, as in people may want to be your friend. If you're in for lesser drug or misc larceny, gun possession, simple assault type crimes, you're a nobody. Kid dickers are separated out here because they are absolutely targets, and rapists are often targeted as well. As another commenter mentioned, if you have crimes against women and children, you're gonna have a bad time. I haven't ever personally been in jail, but I speak on behalf of my parents who have both been in and out. While no crimes were necessarily respected by all, crimes such as stealing or making counterfeit money were seen by fellow inmates as more impressive, and these people would have an easier time getting along with others. Pedophiles, rapists, child pornography viewers, etc. These people were despised, so much so that they have their own section of the jail dedicated to them. If a pedophile was put in general population with the rest of the inmates, he'd likely have a knife pulled on him or worse. While inmates all commit crimes, most are still able to look down on the despicable types of human beings that prey on children. A friend of mine got away with 3 robberies, but what put him in jail was an assault to a police officer, and he said jail was easy. He also pointed out that most of the convicts would do research in the prison libraries if they didn't believe you or wanted to confirm your sentence, and if you came up lying about what you were in for, you were fucked or dead, were his words. Not prison, but when I was in jail for growing pot, everyone wanted to steal my knowledge. Sex crimes are the lowest of the low. Priority given to those who commit them against children. For sex offenders, it's PC or having to love in constant fear of violence. Respected crimes are not centered around one thing. It depends on the person. It's not like with the other way around where everyone hates sex offenders. Even the COs will sometimes tip guys off that they should check somebody's paperwork. Not an ex-con but related to several. Here's a list of people that are usually killed on sight. Snitches, rapists, a lot of the time, pedophiles, and murderers of women and children. I'm probably missing a few. Here's a list of criminals that aren't necessarily respected but preferred by prisoners. Murder of rival gang members, drug traffickers, dealers, and people on drug possession charges. The way they find your charges is that you are put in with paperwork, and this paperwork has a list of what you're in for. Your respective race's gang will have people go and ask to see your papers, and afterwards you'll be judged by them. Some prisons might be different from country to country. Child molesters and women abuse are number 1 most hated. They usually check into PC. So do hitters cause they always have a target on their back. There is no real respected crimes in the prison, everyone equal until someone decides to check you. Chomos, child killers, are number 1 in everyone's list. The guards. The guys. Every single person. Guards react slower to the incident when they know. Aside from specific gang-related praises, like Serranos respecting their fellows for Norteño killings, the only respected crime is when someone handles number 1. Even then I wouldn't consider that truly respected. You could still get into shit. The only real respect you get is from the crimes you commit while you're in there. One time in prison, I was attacked by a gang of grammar Nazis, and believe it or not, knowing the difference between where and were literally saved my life. I asked a friend who has been to jail, since I have no experience. Aside from child molesters who are universally despised, you're not respected for your crime, you're respected for how you conduct yourself. If you stay out of drama and respect others, you'll get the same in return. Just be prepared to stand your ground. The worst thing about prison was the dementors. They were flying all over the place and they were scary, and then they'd come down and they'd suck the soul out of your body and it'd hoit. Worked in a jail. From my experience being in close quarters with criminals and alleged criminals, the obvious crimes were severely hated, like rape, sexual assault, child porn, beating women or kids. People in cases like this were all put in a separate pod. No crimes were really respected, but one guy the first knew for shooting his cheating wife, and the guy she was cheating with was respected for that though. But I believe it was only because of the way he really owned it and joked so often about it. For whatever reason they really liked this guy, and to be honest, even I found it hard to hate him for it. Dude was the nicest guy the first ever met. The only hated offenders are child molesters, child murderers, abusers, rapists, sex offenders, snitches. It really depends on the state and institution. Like in my state, elderly abusers, abusers of handicapped, mentally retarded, anyone who's deemed as vulnerable and defenseless is also a huge no-no. I'm not an ex-con. I've done time in county and state. Sex crimes are the worst crimes you can have. If you have a sex crime, you basically have a green light on you. Even in protective custody, sex offenders and snitches get stabbed and beat up. Also, any crimes involving children are the worst. Child endangerment charges will get you killed, obviously sex crimes that involve a child. Violence towards a child will also get you a green light on the yard. The crimes that command the most respect among inmates are bank robbery, murder, racketeering. A lot of hustlers that got caught with weight are also respected. I have a friend who constantly is going to jail for really basic things like graffiti, but he always seems to have a pretty okay time. He just doodles with whatever he can find, and when people get curious he draws whatever officers and fellow cellmates ask him to. Lots of people wanting self-portraits. But he always seems to make friends. Honestly, I'm really happy hearing that these pedos were targeted so much. Pedos deserve to die. Painfully. I am neither ex-con nor prison employee, but I will watch this closely. There are crimes I would be willing to get to prison just for revenge, if done to my children. Hope cons feel the same for the peace of my mind. If you're a child rapist, you're screwed. Half the men in there got kids back at home. Here, terrorism. The guy who went around town and stabbed few and one of his fellow Muslims was sadly not beaten to death in prison. He was then moved to some other place there where he is not allowed to see other inmates. In my opinion, a person like that should be put in with the rest and let the prisoners redeem themselves a little from the crimes they have committed. Pretty much what everybody else here has said. Don't fuck kids or rape people and you'll be fine. WTF is your spelling? How does the word get out about a criminal history? Con Google? Where? It was just not where you wanted to be, so don't be there. In Australia, generally speaking, murderers were given respect, though the crime itself might not be respected. Drug crimes were pretty middle of the way. The crime itself was respected even if the criminal wasn't. If you were a kid toucher, you went into protection prison, because if you were in mainstream, people would jump on your head. The Australian term for being a snitch was called being a dog, which would get people jumping on your head just as fast as being a kid toucher, which earned the protection prisons the term boneyard, where all the dogs are. IDK if anyone else watches, beyond scared straight, but the inmates absolutely hated the kids who came in from beating on their moms and stuff. People who knew the difference between were and where were respected. Others were fucked right in the butt. Were. Using where instead of were. That shit will get you fucked up in prison for sure. Brit here, from my experience a lot of fraud etc. is fine providing that victims are big corporations and or the government, kind of a respectable crime. Drugs, affray, shoplifting etc. are the main ones and perfectly fine. Obviously sex crimes and pedophiles are on the lowest rung. Burglary and mugging etc. are not respected, or weren't where I was. Anything invading someone's personal home or similar were considered pretty shitty behavior, especially if your victim was a little old lady. Murder depends entirely on the reason. Lady who killed her abusive ex pretty much ran the wing. Lady who murdered her cousin because they burnt the sausages at a barbecue, not so much respect, but fear. The two women on my wing who had the most respect was one who was in for assaulting a police officer, her story suggested self-defense, and a woman who along with 3 of her friends beat the shit out of her daughter's abusive partner. Fun fact. The Canadian term for chomo is goof. Were respected. Were hated. Were. You are welcome. Where what? My best mate was arrested at the age of 18 because he and a mate tried to stay in IKEA overnight. Eventually they were caught by some people doing construction work and the police showed up. And #X200B. Realizing that these 2 guys were just teens messing about, they treated them as if they were hardcore criminals in a fun way. They nicknamed them our country's most wanted criminals, took them to the police station in 2 separate cars and have some biker cops lead and follow them. Once in prison they continued these shenanigans and they were treated exceptionally well. They had to stay overnight and in the morning they were allowed to go into the courtyard, but were advised not to. My friend thought, fuck it, I'm in it for the whole experience, and did go into the courtyard. The other inmates quickly found out what he was in for and also treated him the same way the cops did, all in good humor. And #X200B. So I guess if you want respect, try to sleep in IKEA. Not a con, but my dad used to be a supervisor when I was a tween. One of the guys he supervised went to prison for breaking into a house and raping a woman. I was a preteen back then, so I didn't know the entire story. All I remember is that the guy had his nuts cut off with a rusty can while serving his sentence. That's the last I heard of anything. It was over 20 years ago. A kid I went to grade school with went to jail for kidnapping and home invasion, amongst other charges. I heard from others from my grade that are still in contact with him that he got brutally beaten a bunch of times.